I choose
Mom,
Kaya.
don't leave.
The words
I'm right
came from
here,
a
sweetie. I'm not
7-year-old
going
boy
anywhere.
whose body was failing him, but whose voice carried the weight of a final decision. Miho Park lay in a hospital bed in Seoul's most exclusive medical center. Tubes running from his small arms, monitors beeping a rhythm that everyone knew was borrowed time. His family stood in the hallway outside, arguing in hushed Korean about inheritance and timelines and when it would finally be over. They didn't know he could hear them. They didn't know he'd already made his choice. The social worker looked at the small boy, then at the young black woman standing awkwardly by the window, and then back at her paperwork. This wasn't standard procedure. This was going to cause problems. Big problems. Miho, the social worker said carefully, are you sure? Miss Johnson isn't family. She's not even Korean. Your grandmother, your aunt, they're willing to take care of you. They're waiting for me to die, Miho said in English, his voice flat with a truth that made the adults in the room flinch. Kaya is the only one who wants me to live. Kaya Johnson felt her throat close. She'd been volunteering at this hospital for 6 months, reading to sick children, bringing them small gifts, trying to make their final days less lonely. Miho had been different from the start. He'd looked at her with eyes too old for his face and asked her in broken English if she believed in miracles. She'd said yes, even though she didn't. And somehow, over months of McDonald's fries smuggled past nurses and whispered conversations about American superhero movies, this dying child had become the most important person in her world. Miho, I can't, Kaya whispered. I'm not qualified. I don't have money. I don't have the right to. You're the only one who sees me, Miho interrupted. And now he was crying, tears sliding down cheeks that had grown hollow over the months. Everyone else just sees a dead boy walking. Please, Kaya. I don't want to die with people who are counting my last breaths like money. The social worker's pen hovered over the form. Korean law was clear but complicated. A child over 7 could express preference in guardianship cases when parents were absent and the child was deemed competent. Miho's father had been in Singapore for 8 months, building a business empire while his son's body shut down. His mother had died 3 years ago in a car accident. The extended family had visited exactly twice in 6 months. Kaya had visited 173 times. The social worker had counted. If I start this process, the social worker said slowly, his family will fight it. They have money, lawyers, connections. You'll be going to war. Kaya looked at Miho, really looked at him, saw the hope in his eyes, the desperate pleas that no child should have to beg for. She thought about her little brother, Marcus, who died of leukemia when she was 16 because their mother couldn't afford the treatment. She remembered holding his hand in a county hospital, while he asked her why no one was fighting for him. She'd promised herself then, kneeling by his bed, that she'd never let another child feel abandoned. She'd broken a lot of promises in her life. This wouldn't be one of them. Start the paperwork, Kaya said. I'll fight. The social worker nodded and began writing. In the hallway, Miho's Aunt Seojin was on the phone with the family lawyer, her voice sharp with outrage. The Park family controlled a pharmaceutical empire worth billions. They weren't accustomed to losing anything, especially not to a 28-year-old black woman from Chicago with student debt and a volunteer badge. But they didn't know what Kaya had survived to get here. And they didn't know that sometimes, love is the only currency that matters. The war was about to begin. 3 days later, the hospital's administrative conference room had been transformed into a battlefield. Kaya sat on one side of a long table, wearing the only professional outfit she owned, a navy dress she'd bought at a thrift store and shoes that pinched her toes. Across from her sat the Park family's legal team, 4 lawyers in suits that cost more than her annual rent, flanked by Miho's Aunt Seojin and his grandmother, Halmoni Park. Halmoni Park was 72 years old and looked like she'd been carved from ice. She wore a traditional hanbok in deep burgundy, her silver hair pulled back severely, her face a mask of controlled fury. She hadn't looked at Kaya once since entering the room. As far as Halmoni was concerned, Kaya didn't exist as a person. She was a problem to be eliminated. This is absurd, Seojin said in English, her accent crisp from years of international boarding schools. That woman has no claim to my nephew. She's a stranger who manipulated a sick child. I didn't manipulate anyone, Kaya said quietly. I've been visiting Miho for 6 months because no one else would. Where were you? How dare you, Sujin hissed. We are his family. We have been dealing with the complex medical decisions, the financial arrangements, the preparations for his death, Kaya finished. You've been preparing for him to die. I've been trying to help him live. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Ms. Johnson, while your intentions may be admirable, the reality is that you lack the resources, the cultural competency, and the legal standing to serve as guardian to a minor Korean citizen with complex medical needs. Korean law allows for children over 7 to express guardianship preference. The hospital's legal advocate countered. She was a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Choi who'd taken Kaya's case pro bono after reviewing Miho's visitor logs. Miho has been clear and consistent in his choice. A child that age doesn't understand the implications, the park lawyer argued. He's been unduly influenced by someone who has spent considerable time with him, while he's been vulnerable and isolated. Isolated by his own family, Ms. Choi shot back. My client has documentation of every visit. 173 in 6 months. The Park family? 8 visits total, mostly for medical consultations. None lasting more than 20 minutes. Halmoni Park spoke for the first time, her voice low and cold, speaking in Korean. Seo-jin translated with visible satisfaction. My mother says that this woman cannot possibly understand our ways, our culture, our traditions around death and dying. She says allowing a foreigner to control the final days of a Park family child would be a disgrace to our ancestors. Kaya felt something hot and sharp rise in her chest. She'd spent the last 3 months learning basic Korean using phone apps, staying up late after her shift at the coffee shop where she worked to pay rent, practicing phrases with Miho during their visits. She wasn't fluent, but she'd learned enough. She looked directly at Halmoni Park and spoke in careful, formal Korean. Halmoni, I know I am not Korean. I know I am not family by blood. But I love Miho. And he is afraid. He should not be afraid alone. The room went silent. Halmoni Park's eyes widened fractionally, the first crack in her icy composure. Seo-jin's mouth opened, then closed. Even the lawyers looked surprised. Miho had taught her those exact words. They'd practiced them together. Kaya stumbling over pronunciation while Miho giggled and corrected her gently. He told her that speaking Korean to his grandmother would matter more than any legal argument. He'd been right. Halmoni Park studied Kaya for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. Not acceptance, not approval, but perhaps the smallest seed of doubt about who this strange woman actually was. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Kaya presented her documentation, her visitor logs, photos of Miho smiling for the first time in months, a journal he'd kept where he wrote about Kaya in a mixture of Korean and English. She read an entry aloud, her voice shaking. Kaya brought me French fries today even though the nurses said no. She said rules are important but so is being happy. I was happy today. I forgot I was dying for almost 1 whole hour. The judge, an older man with kind eyes, listened to everything. He reviewed the medical reports, the family's claims, the evidence of Kaya's consistent presence. Finally, he spoke. Temporary guardianship is granted to Ms. Kaya Johnson for a period of 30 days, during which time reasonable efforts will be made to contact the child's father and facilitate family reunification. If the father does not return or chooses not to assume guardianship within that period, the arrangement will be reviewed for permanency. Kaya felt the world tilt. She'd won. At least for now. Seo-jin stood abruptly. This is not over. We will appeal. We will fight this with every resource we have. You do that, Kaya said, meeting her eyes. I'll be with Miho. She left the conference room and went straight to Miho's hospital room. He was awake, propped up on pillows, looking small and fragile in the big bed. When he saw her face, he knew. You won, he whispered. For now, Kaya said, sitting on the edge of his bed and taking his hand. We've got 30 days. Your dad has to come back, or they'll review everything again. He won't come, Miho said flatly. He hasn't come in 8 months. Why would he come now? Kaya didn't have an answer for that. So instead, she pulled out the book they'd been reading together, a battered copy of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in English, and began to read. Miho closed his eyes and listened, a small smile on his face. Neither of them noticed Halmoni Park standing in the doorway watching. The next 2 weeks were hell. The Park family didn't just appeal the guardianship decision. They launched a comprehensive assault designed to destroy Kaya's credibility and force her out of Miho's life. It started with private investigators following her everywhere, photographing her going to work, coming home to her tiny studio apartment, meeting with Ms. Choi. The photos appeared in Korean tabloids with headlines screaming about the foreign woman stealing a dying heir. Then came the character assassination. Someone leaked a distorted version of Kaya's financial history, her student loans, a credit card payment she'd been late on 3 years ago. The narrative became that she was after the Park family fortune, using a sick child to access wealth and status. Kaya's landlord received an anonymous offer to triple her rent. Her boss at the coffee shop got calls warning that employing her would damage the shop's reputation. Someone spray-painted "child thief" on her apartment door in English and Korean. Through it all, Kaya showed up at the hospital every single day. She read to Miho, brought him his favorite foods, helped him with physical therapy exercises even though they both knew his body was failing. She slept in the chair beside his bed most nights because he had nightmares and the nurses were too busy to comfort him. She was exhausted. She was scared. But she didn't leave. On day 16 of the temporary guardianship, Miho's cousin Ji-hoon showed up at the hospital. He was 29, handsome in an expensive suit kind of way, and he'd visited Miho exactly once before, 3 months ago, staying for 10 minutes before taking a phone call and leaving. Now he appeared with flowers and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Kaya," he said warmly, speaking in perfect American English, "I wanted to apologize for my family's behavior. They're traditional, set in their ways. But I think what you're doing is admirable." Kaya was immediately suspicious. "Thank you," she said carefully. "I'd like to help," Ji-hoon continued. "Maybe bridge the gap between you and the family. I could talk to my aunt, my grandmother. Make them see that you genuinely care about Miho." "Why would you do that?" "Because Miho deserves better than what he's gotten from us," Ji-hoon said, and he sounded sincere. "I'll be honest, I didn't pay attention before. I was busy with work, with my life. But seeing you fight for him made me realize how badly we failed him." Over the next week, Ji-hoon visited regularly. He brought Miho gifts, spent time talking to him, and seemed genuinely interested in building a relationship. He took Kaya to coffee and listened to her talk about the challenges she was facing. He offered advice on dealing with his family, suggested legal strategies, even offered to help with her rent when she mentioned the landlord's threat. Kaya wanted to trust him. She needed an ally in the family. So she started confiding in him, telling him about her fears that the 30-day deadline was approaching and Miho's father still hadn't responded to any attempts at contact. She didn't notice Ji-hoon recording their conversations on his phone. On day 23, everything exploded. An edited recording of Kaya's voice appeared on Korean social media. In it, she appeared to say, "I need this guardianship to work out financially, and if the father doesn't come back, I'll have access to everything." The audio was spliced from different conversations taken completely out of context, but it sounded damning. The media went insane. The narrative shifted from gold digger to con artist actively scheming to steal a fortune. Protesters appeared outside the hospital with signs. Kaya's photo was everywhere. Her face twisted in anger from a moment when she'd been yelling at a reporter to leave her alone. Ms. Choi called an emergency meeting. "This is bad," she said bluntly. "The recording is obviously manipulated, but proving that will take time we don't have. The court might revoke temporary guardianship based on this." "Who did this?" Kaya demanded, though she already knew. "Ji-hoon," Ms. Choi confirmed. "He's been working with the family lawyer the entire time. Every conversation you had with him was recorded and mined for material." Kaya felt sick. She'd been so desperate for an ally, so tired of fighting alone. that she'd walked right into the trap. "What do I do?" she whispered. "We fight," Ms. Choi said. "But Kaya, you need to understand. We might lose. The judge might decide that all this chaos isn't in Miho's best interest. They might remove you." Kaya went to Miho's room and found him watching the news on his iPad, tears streaming down his face. He looked up when she entered. "They're going to take you away," he said. "And then I'll be alone again." Kaya sat beside him and pulled him into her arms, careful of his 4 lines. "No," she said fiercely. "I'm not going anywhere. I promised you, remember? I keep my promises." "Everyone leaves," Miho whispered against her shoulder. "Mom died. Dad left. You're the only one who stayed, and now they're going to make you go too." "Listen to me," Kaya said, pulling back to look him in the eyes. "I don't care what they do. I don't care about court orders or legal documents. You are not alone. Even if they drag me out of this hospital, I will find a way back to you. You understand me?" Miho nodded, but his eyes were full of fear. That night, while Miho slept, Kaya sat in the hallway and cried for the first time since this whole nightmare began. She'd tried so hard. She'd fought with everything she had, and it still might not be enough. She was wiping her eyes when she heard footsteps. She looked up, expecting a nurse, and instead saw a man she'd never met before but somehow knew immediately. He was tall, probably early 40s, wearing an expensive black coat over a rumpled dress shirt, like he'd been traveling for days. His face was drawn with exhaustion and something that looked like grief. His eyes, dark and intense, scanned the hallway until they landed on her. "You're Kaya," he said. It wasn't a question. "And you're Miho's father," she replied, standing up. Jaewon Park looked at her for a long moment. "I got a call from the hospital 3 weeks ago. I was in the middle of closing a deal worth hundreds of millions. I told them I'd handle it remotely." He laughed bitterly. "I thought I could handle my dying son remotely, like he was a business problem." "Why are you here now?" Kaya asked. "Because my mother called me yesterday and told me that a stranger was trying to steal my son, that some American woman had manipulated him for money. She demanded I come home and fix this." Jaewon's expression hardened. "So I came home. And on the flight I read everything. Every news article, every court document, every single visitor log from the last 6 months." He stepped closer. 173 visits. You've been here almost every day for 6 months." "He needed someone," Kaya said simply. "I visited him 8 times, Jaewon continued, his voice rough. 8 times in 8 months. I told myself I was building his future, securing his legacy. But the truth is I couldn't stand watching him die. So I ran. And you, a complete stranger, did what I couldn't. You stayed." "I'm not trying to replace you," Kaya said quickly. "I know you're his father. I know you love him. I just loved him when I didn't," Jaewon finished. "That's what my mother doesn't understand. That's what my sister and my cousin can't see. You're not trying to steal anything. You're giving him what we took away." He looked exhausted and broken and ashamed. Kaya felt something unexpected. A wave of sympathy for this man who'd failed his child but was finally here. "He's sleeping," she said. "Room 304. You should go see him." "Will you come with me?" Jaewon asked. "I don't think I can do this alone." So Kaya walked with him to Miho's room. Jaewon stopped in the doorway, looking at his son, really looking at him for the first time in months. Miho looked so small in the hospital bed. His face pale, his breathing shallow. Machines beeped softly in the darkness. "I don't know if he'll want to see me," Jaewon whispered. "Only one way to find out," Kaya said. They entered quietly. Miho stirred, opened his eyes, saw his father standing there, and for a moment no one moved. "Dad," Miho said, his voice uncertain, like he wasn't sure he was seeing correctly. "I'm here," Jaewon said, and his voice broke. "I'm so sorry I'm late." "You're always late," Miho said, but there was no anger in it. Just a statement of fact. Jaewon moved to the bed and knelt beside it. "I know. I'm sorry. I thought if I built something big enough, made enough money, I could protect you from this. From being sick. From dying. But I was wrong. The only thing you needed was for me to be here. You're here now, Miho said quietly. I am. And I'm not leaving again. Jaewon looked at Kaya. And neither is she, if you want her to stay. You're not going to fight her? Miho asked, surprised. Fight her? I'm going to thank her. She saved you when I couldn't. Jaewon reached out and took Kaya's hand, pulling her closer to the bed. We're going to do this together. All three of us. If that's okay with you. Miho looked between them and for the first time in weeks he smiled. A real smile. Yeah, he said. That's okay. They stayed like that for a while, the three of them in the quiet hospital room, forming something that looked almost like a family. Outside, dawn was breaking over Seoul. And in the hallway, Halmoni Park stood watching through the window, her expression unreadable. The next morning, Jaewon called a family meeting at the Park Estate, a massive traditional house in Gangnam that Kaya had only seen in photos. She wasn't invited, but Jaewon insisted she come. You're part of this now, he said. They need to understand that. The house was intimidating, all dark wood and stone, surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens. Inside, the family was already gathered in a formal sitting room. Halmoni Park sat in the place of honor, Seojin beside her, Jihoon lurking near the window. Several other relatives Kaya didn't recognize filled the space, all of them turning to stare when she entered with Jaewon. The hostility was immediate and palpable. Seojin stood. You brought her here? To our family home. Sit down, Jaewon said, his voice carrying an authority Kaya hadn't heard before. This was the CEO, the man who ran a billion-dollar empire. All of you sit down and listen. Halmoni Park said something sharp in Korean. Jaewon responded in the same language, his tone respectful but firm. Kaya caught enough words to understand they were arguing about respect and tradition and appropriate behavior. Finally, Jaewon switched to English, clearly for Kaya's benefit. I'm going to say this once. Kaya Johnson is not an enemy. She's not a gold digger. She's not trying to steal anything from this family. She's the only person who cared enough about my son to actually be there for him when he needed someone. She manipulated him, Jihoon said. The recordings prove that you're a liar and a manipulator. Jaewon cut him off. I've had my own team analyze the audio. It's been edited, spliced together from multiple conversations to create false context. You set her up. Jihoon's face went red. I was protecting the family interests. No. You were protecting your inheritance. Jaewon's voice was ice. You thought if you could get rid of Kaya and make me look bad for abandoning Miho, you'd be next in line when he died. Admit it. The room went silent. Jihoon looked around for support and found none. Even Seojin was looking at him with disgust. Get out, Jaewon said quietly. You're no longer welcome at family gatherings. And if I ever hear of you going near Miho or Kaya again, I'll destroy you financially and legally. That's a promise. Jihoon left without another word. Slamming the door behind him, Jaewon turned to his aunt. And you? You tried to physically remove Miho from the hospital against medical advice. You've harassed Kaya, vandalized her apartment, destroyed her reputation in the media. Why? Because she doesn't belong, Seojin said coldly. She's not Korean. She's not family. She can't possibly understand what it means to be a Park. You're right, Kaya said, speaking for the first time. Everyone turned to look at her. I'm not Korean. I'm not a Park. I don't understand your traditions or your history. But I understand that Miho is a little boy who's dying, and who's been left alone by the people who should love him most. She looked directly at Seojin. You say I don't belong. But I've been there. Every day. Every nightmare. Every painful treatment. Every moment he was scared. Where were you? How dare you? Seojin began. No, Halmoni Park said quietly in English, silencing her daughter. She looked at Kaya. You spoke Korean to me. In the hospital. Why? Miho taught me, Kaya said. He wanted me to be able to talk to you. To show respect. He said it would matter to you. It did, Halmoni admitted. She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in Korean to Jae-won. He nodded, looking surprised. My mother says, Jae-won translated, though Halmoni was clearly capable of speaking English herself, that she has been unfair. She says that anyone who would learn our language for a dying child's sake is not without honor. Halmoni stood and walked over to Kaya. Up close, her eyes were not cold. They were sad. Deeply, profoundly sad. My grandson is dying, she said in English now, her accent heavy but clear. I have watched 3 generations of Parks. I have buried my husband, my eldest son, my daughter-in-law. I did not think I would have to bury my great-grandson. I cannot bear it. So I stayed away. Her voice cracked. I blamed you because it was easier than blaming myself. Easier than admitting that I am a coward who cannot face death. Kaya felt tears prick her eyes. He asks about you, she said softly. He wants to see you. He's afraid you don't love him anymore. Halmoni closed her eyes. I will come, she said. Tomorrow. I will come. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it was a beginning. The family meeting ended with a tentative truce. Seojin still looked furious, but she didn't argue when Jae-won announced that he was formally supporting Kaya's guardianship and would be staying in Seoul to care for Miho himself. The other relatives murmured their assent, more out of respect for Jae-won than any real acceptance of Kaya. As they left, Jae-won caught Kaya's arm. That was incredibly brave, he said. I was terrified, Kaya admitted. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing it anyway. He smiled. You've been teaching me that. They drove back to the hospital together in Jae-won's car. An expensive sedan that smelled like leather and money. Kaya sat in the passenger seat, acutely aware of the man beside her. He was handsome in a severe way, all sharp lines and controlled intensity. But there was something vulnerable in his eyes now, a crack in the armor. Can I ask you something? Jae-won said as they waited at a red light. Sure. Why did you keep coming back? Even before all this legal chaos, when it was just a volunteer position, why did you keep visiting Miho specifically? Kaya looked out the window at the Seoul streets, bright with neon even in daytime. I had a little brother, she said. Marcus. He was diagnosed with leukemia when I was 15 and he was 9. We couldn't afford treatment. Not real treatment. We did charity care, county hospitals, whatever we could scrape together. But it wasn't enough. She swallowed hard. He died when I was 16. And I remember in those last weeks my mom had to work. She had 3 jobs trying to pay for his medication. So he was alone a lot. In a hospital room. Scared. And I would visit after school, but I was just a kid myself. I didn't know how to help him. I'm sorry, Jae-won said quietly. The day he died, he asked me why no one was fighting for him. Why everyone had given up. And I didn't have an answer. Kaya's voice was steady now. I promised myself then that I'd never let another kid feel that way. That if I ever had the chance to fight for someone, I would. So when I saw Miho alone in that hospital room, I saw Marcus. And I couldn't walk away. Jae-won pulled the car over suddenly, parking on a side street. He turned to face her. You've been carrying that for 12 years. Some promises you keep forever. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Thank you, he said. For seeing my son when I couldn't. For being stronger than me. Kaya looked at their joined hands. His fingers were warm, and she realized this was the first time anyone had touched her with gentleness in weeks. She'd been so focused on fighting, on surviving, that she'd forgotten what simple kindness felt like. You're here now, she said. That's what matters. Am I too late? Jae-won asked, and she knew he wasn't just asking about Miho. I don't know, Kaya said honestly. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out together. They sat there for a moment, hands linked, both of them carrying wounds they were only beginning to understand. Then Jae-won's phone rang. He glanced at it and his expression changed. It's the hospital, he said, answering immediately. His face went pale as he listened. "We'll be right there." He hung up and looked at Kaya. Miho collapsed. "They're running tests, but his heart is showing signs of failure. They think it might be days now, not weeks." The world tilted. Kaya had known this was coming, had been preparing for it, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way that stole her breath. "Drive," she said. "Drive fast." They broke every speed limit getting back to the hospital. By the time they arrived, Miho had been moved to intensive care, surrounded by machines and specialists. His small body looked even more fragile now, his skin translucent, his breathing labored. He was awake though, and when he saw them he tried to smile. "Hey," he whispered. Kaya went to one side of the bed, Jaewon to the other. They each took one of his hands. "We're here," Kaya said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Both of us." "Good," Miho said. "I was worried you'd be fighting somewhere and miss the end." "Don't talk like that," Jaewon said roughly. "Dad, it's okay." Miho's eyes were clear, accepting. "I'm not scared anymore. Not with you both here." The doctor entered. A kind-faced woman named Dr. Kim who'd been treating Miho for months. She pulled Kaya and Jaewon aside. "His heart is failing faster than we anticipated," she said quietly. "We have two options. We can make him comfortable, manage his pain, and let nature take its course. Or we can try an experimental treatment, a new transplant protocol that might buy him time to find a donor match. But I have to be honest, the procedure is risky. It could kill him faster." "What are the odds?" Jaewon asked. 20% survival rate through the surgery itself. If he survives, maybe a 30% chance of responding well enough to stabilize for transplant. "So basically no chance," Kaya whispered. "Basically," Dr. Kim admitted. "But it's a chance. However small." They looked at each other, then at Miho, who was watching them with knowing eyes. "It's my choice, isn't it?" Miho said. "What happens to me?" Kaya went back to his side. "Yeah, baby. It's your choice. What do you want?" Miho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "If I do the surgery and die, will you both be there?" "Yes," they said in unison. "And if I do nothing and die, will you both be there?" "Yes." "Then I want to try," Miho said. "I want to fight. Because you taught me that's what you do when you love something. You fight for it." Kaya felt tears streaming down her face. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we'll fight." The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. They had one night. One final night before everything changed. Kaya and Jaewon stayed with Miho through the night. They didn't talk much. Instead, they took turns reading to him from Harry Potter, his favorite book. They told stories about themselves, about their lives before this moment. Jaewon talked about building his first company, about the failures and successes. Kaya talked about Chicago, about her mother, about Marcus. Around midnight, Miho fell asleep exhausted. Kaya and Jaewon sat in chairs on either side of his bed, keeping vigil. "I'm terrified," Jaewon said into the darkness. "Me too. If he dies tomorrow, I'll never forgive myself for the time I wasted." "He knows you love him," Kaya said. "That's what matters now." Jaewon looked at her across Miho's sleeping form. "How are you so strong?" "I'm not. I'm falling apart. I'm just doing it quietly." He stood and came around the bed, sitting in the chair next to hers. "When this is over, when he's recovered or when we've said goodbye, I want to know you better. The real you. Not the guardian, not the fighter. Just Kaya." "Why?" she asked, though she thought she knew. "Because I've watched you these past few days, and I've seen something I haven't seen in years. Someone who cares more about people than profit. Someone who keeps promises. Someone worth knowing. You barely know me. I know you learned Korean from my son. I know you fought my entire family for him. I know you kept showing up even when it cost you everything. That's enough." Kaya felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "Ask me again," she said. "After tomorrow. After we know." "I will," Jaewon promised. They sat together through the night, two people learning that sometimes love arrives in the darkest moments, born from shared fear and hope. The surgery began at 6 in the morning. Dr. Kim and her team wheeled Miho into the operating room while Kaya and Jae-won walked alongside, holding his hands until they reached the doors that said, "Authorized personnel only." Miho looked up at them. "See you on the other side?" "See you on the other side," they promised. Then he was gone, disappearing through the doors, and they were left in the hallway with nothing to do but wait. The waiting room for surgical families was a depressing space with uncomfortable chairs, outdated magazines, and fluorescent lights that hummed. Kaya and Jae-won sat side by side, not talking, just existing in the same terrible space of hope and fear. Hours passed. Nurses came by with updates, each one vague and carefully neutral. The surgery was proceeding. There were complications. They were managing. More waiting. Around hour 6, Halmoni Park arrived. She'd brought food, traditional Korean dishes in carefully packed containers. She set them on the table and sat across from Kaya and Jae-won. "I called a temple," she said in English. "Monks are praying for him." "Thank you," Kaya said, surprised. Halmoni looked at her directly. "I have been thinking about what you said. About being there." She paused, choosing words carefully. "When my husband died, I was not there. I was at a business meeting. I thought work was more important. I have regretted it every day for 20 years. She reached across and took Kaya's hand. "You were there. You are there. That is a gift. Whatever happens today, you gave him that gift." Kaya squeezed the old woman's hand, feeling the tentative bridge forming between them. They waited together. Halmoni prayed quietly in Korean. Jae-won paced. Kaya sat very still, focusing on breathing, on not falling apart. At hour 8, Dr. Kim emerged. Her face was unreadable, the professional mask all surgeons wear. Kaya stood so fast she felt dizzy. "He's alive," Dr. Kim said, and Kaya felt her legs give out. Jae-won caught her, holding her up. "The surgery was successful. His body is accepting the artificial support system. We're not out of the woods yet. The next 72 hours are critical. But he made it through." "Can we see him?" Jae-won asked. "In a few hours, once he's stable in recovery." "But yes." They waited 4 more hours. When they were finally allowed into the recovery room, Miho looked even smaller than before, surrounded by even more machines. But his chest was rising and falling steadily. His heart monitor beeped a strong, regular rhythm. Kaya approached the bed and very gently touched his hand. "You did it," she whispered. "You fought and you won." Miho didn't wake, but his fingers twitched, responding to her voice. Over the next 3 days, Kaya and Jae-won barely left the hospital. They took turns sleeping in the chair beside Miho's bed, keeping watch. The nurses brought them food. Halmoni came every day, sitting quietly, knitting something complicated and praying. On day 3, Miho opened his eyes. "Hi," he said, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "Hi yourself," Kaya said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Did I miss anything?" "Nothing important," Jae-won said, but his voice was thick with emotion. "Just us being scared out of our minds." "Sorry," Miho said. Then, "I'm hungry." It was the most beautiful thing Kaya had ever heard. Recovery was slow. Miho spent 2 more weeks in the hospital, gradually regaining strength. The artificial support system was working, buying them time to find a donor match. Dr. Kim was optimistic but cautious. They'd won a battle, not the war. During those weeks, Kaya and Jae-won fell into a routine. They shared Miho's care, trading off who slept at the hospital and who went home to shower and change. They learned each other's rhythms, preferences, fears. They talked in the quiet hours, sharing pieces of themselves. Kaya learned that Jae-won had built his company from nothing after his father had cut him off for marrying Miho's mother, a woman the family deemed beneath their status. That he'd worked himself nearly to death to prove his worth. That his wife had died in a car accident 3 years ago. And he'd buried himself in work because grief felt too dangerous to face. Jae-won learned that Kaya had come to Korea on a teaching English program, intending to stay 1 year, but had fallen in love with Seoul. That she'd started volunteering at the hospital because she missed her brother. That she'd been alone for most of her adult life, afraid to let people close because everyone she'd ever loved had left. That's depressing, Jaewon observed one night when they were both exhausted and honest. Yeah, well, I'm working on it, Kaya said. Me too. They were sitting in the hospital cafeteria at 2 in the morning, drinking terrible coffee because Miho was sleeping peacefully for once and the nurses had kicked them out to do their rounds. Can I ask you something? Kaya said. Always. What happens after? When Miho gets better, when this is all over, what happens to us? Jaewon set down his coffee cup. What do you want to happen? I don't know. That's the problem. 3 weeks ago I was a volunteer with a small life. Now I'm legally responsible for a child. I'm connected to a family that mostly hates me. And I'm sitting in a hospital at 2 in the morning with a man I barely know but somehow can't imagine not knowing. She laughed shakily. It's a lot. It is a lot, Jaewon agreed. He reached across the table and took her hand. Here's what I know. I know that my son loves you. I know that you make him feel safe in a way I never could. I know that watching you fight for him has made me want to be a better man. And I know that somewhere in the middle of this chaos I started caring about you. Not because you're helping Miho. Because you're you. Kaya looked at their joined hands. We barely know each other. Then let's change that. When Miho is better, when things are calmer, let me take you to dinner. A real dinner. Not hospital cafeteria coffee at obscene hours. Let me learn what you like, what you dream about, what makes you laugh. Give me a chance. And if it doesn't work? Then we figure it out like adults. But Kaya, I think it might work. I think we might be exactly what each other needs. She looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the hope in his eyes, the vulnerability he was offering. And she realized that she wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted the possibility of something real after years of being alone. Okay, she said. When Miho's better, you can take me to dinner. Jaewon smiled and it transformed his entire face. I'm going to hold you to that. 3 weeks after the surgery, Dr. Kim called them into her office. Kaya's heart immediately sank. Bad news was always delivered in offices, not at bedsides. But when they sat down, Dr. Kim was smiling. We found a match, she said. A donor heart. Compatible tissue type, good condition. The family has agreed to the donation. We can schedule transplant surgery within the week. Kaya couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This was it. The miracle they'd been praying for. What's the success rate? Jaewon asked, always practical. For a patient in Miho's current condition, with the support system he's on, 70% survival through surgery. 85% chance of 5-year survival after that if his body accepts the heart. Those were good odds. Great odds. Better than they'd had any right to hope for. When? Kaya asked. 3 days. We need to prep him, make sure he's strong enough. But 3 days. They told Miho that evening. He took the news with remarkable calm. So I get a new heart, he said. Will I be different after? You'll be you, Kaya promised. Just healthier. Will you both still love me? Forever, Jaewon said. No matter what. Miho nodded, satisfied. Okay. Let's do it. The 3 days before surgery were strange. Hopeful and terrifying in equal measure. Kaya helped Miho write letters to people just in case. Jaewon told him stories about his mother, keeping her memory alive. Halmoni came and taught Miho a traditional prayer in Korean. The night before surgery, Kaya and Jaewon were alone in the hallway while Miho slept. They'd been standing close together a lot lately, finding comfort in proximity. I'm scared, Kaya admitted. Me too. What if it doesn't work? What if we lose him after all this? Jaewon pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean against him, let herself be held. Then we'll grieve together. And we'll survive because he taught us how to be strong. But Kaya, we're not going to lose him. He's a fighter. He gets that from you. She pulled back enough to look up at him. I love him, she said. I know I'm not his mother. I know I have no right, but I love him like he's mine. You have every right, Jaewon said fiercely. You earned it. And Kaya, when this is over, when he's recovered, I want us to make this permanent. Legal guardianship, adoption, whatever it takes. I want you to be his mother. Officially. You mean that? I've never meant anything more. She kissed him then, finally, after weeks of dancing around this thing building between them. It was soft and tentative and tasted like hope. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. After the surgery, Kaya said. We'll figure everything out after the surgery. The transplant took 14 hours. 14 hours of waiting, praying, hoping. The family waiting room filled up. Halmoni was there, of course, but also some of Jaewon's business partners, colleagues from the hospital who'd grown fond of Miho, and surprisingly Seojin. Jaewon's aunt approached Kaya hesitantly. May I sit? Kaya nodded, too exhausted to be hostile. I was wrong about you, Seojin said quietly. I saw a threat instead of a blessing. I'm sorry. Okay, Kaya said, because she didn't have energy for more. He loves you, you know. Miho. He talks about you constantly. Kaya said this, Kaya did that. I was jealous. I thought I should be the one he talked about. But I wasn't there. You were. It's not a competition, Kaya said. I know. But it took almost losing him for me to understand that. Seojin took a breath. If you'll let me, I'd like to try again. To be a real aunt. To be part of his life properly. Kaya looked at her and saw genuine regret. Miho would like that, she said. At hour 12, Dr. Kim came out. Her mask was down and she was smiling. The heart is beating, she said. Strong and steady. His body is accepting it. We still have to close and monitor, but all the hard parts are done. He's going to make it. Kaya burst into tears. Jaewon pulled her close and they cried together. Around them, the waiting room erupted in relief and joy. Halmoni was openly weeping, thanking gods and ancestors. Seojin was hugging her mother. 2 hours later, when Miho was in recovery, they were allowed to see him. He was pale and weak, but his color was better. His chest rose and fell with strength that hadn't been there before. Kaya took his hand. You did it, she whispered. You have a new heart. Miho's eyes fluttered open. Does this mean I get a second chance? Yeah, baby, Kaya said, smiling through tears. You get a second chance. We all do. Miho recovered faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, he was out of intensive care. Within a month, he was walking the hospital hallways, gaining weight, looking like a real child instead of a ghost. The new heart was working perfectly, and his body showed no signs of rejection. 3 months after the transplant, Miho was discharged from the hospital. Jaewon had moved into a new house. Not the Park family estate, but a modern home with a garden and space for a child to run. Kaya moved in too, officially and permanently. The adoption paperwork went through without opposition. The Park family, witnessing Miho's transformation and Kaya's unwavering devotion, had dropped all objections. Even the Korean courts, which had initially been skeptical of a foreign single woman adopting, approved the petition when it came with Jaewon's full support and Miho's enthusiastic consent. 6 months after the transplant, Jaewon took Kaya to dinner. A real dinner, at an expensive restaurant with views of the Han River. They dressed up, left Miho with Halmoni, who was delighted to babysit her increasingly healthy great-grandson, and pretended they were just a normal couple on a date. This is weird, Kaya said, laughing. Good weird or bad weird? Jaewon asked. Good. Definitely good. But I'm so used to seeing you in hospital hallways or at 3 in the morning covered in coffee stains. This version of you is very fancy. You're pretty fancy yourself, he said, looking at her with an expression that made her blush. They talked about everything and nothing. About Miho's progress, about Jaewon's business plans, about Kaya's idea to start a non-profit for families of sick children. They talked about their childhoods, their hopes, their fears. And at the end of the night, standing outside her door, she'd moved into the guest room in Jaewon's house. He kissed her properly. Not the desperate kiss from the hospital, but something slower, deeper, full of promise. I'm falling in love with you, he said against her lips. I think I already fell, Kaya admitted. Good, he said, smiling. Because Miho's been planning our wedding for weeks. He's got the whole thing mapped out. Did you know he's appointed himself the ring bearer and the flower boy? Kaya laughed. I did not know that. Should I be concerned? Probably. He's very opinionated about decorations. 8 months after Miho's transplant, Jaewon proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or on a romantic getaway, but at home in the garden with Miho present because he'd insisted on being there. "Will you marry me?" Jaewon asked on one knee, holding a ring that sparkled in the afternoon sun. "Will you be part of this family forever?" "Both of you?" Kaya asked, looking between Jaewon and Miho. "Package deal," Miho said, grinning. "Then yes," Kaya said, laughing and crying. "Yes to both of you." The wedding was small and perfect. They held it in the garden of their home, surrounded by people who mattered. Halmoni was there in traditional dress, smiling with genuine warmth. Seojin came with her family, having slowly rebuilt her relationship with all of them. Dr. Kim and several nurses from the hospital attended. Friends from Kaya's teaching job, colleagues from Jaewon's company, all gathered to celebrate. Miho was indeed the ring bearer and the flower boy, and he took both jobs very seriously. He wore a tiny suit that matched Jaewon's and scattered petals with such enthusiasm that he slipped and almost fell. Kaya caught him laughing and he hugged her tight. "Best mom ever," he whispered. During the vows, Kaya spoke directly to both of them. "Jaewon, you taught me that it's never too late to show up. That love means being present even when it's hard. Miho, you taught me that fighting for someone is the most important thing you can do. You both saved me as much as I saved you." Jaewon's vows were equally emotional. "Kaya, you walked into our lives when we were broken and you put us back together. You showed me what real strength looks like. I promise to love you, to fight for you, to be present for you every day for the rest of my life." When they kissed, Miho cheered so loudly that half the guests laughed. At the reception, Miho pulled Kaya aside. "Can I tell you something?" "Always. When I was sick before the surgery, I was really scared. But then I thought about you, about how you never gave up even when everyone told you to. And I decided if you could be that brave, so could I." His eyes were serious. "You saved my life. Not just with the medical stuff. You saved my life by showing me what it means to be loved." Kaya knelt down to his level, not caring that she was in a white dress. "You saved mine too," she said. "I spent so many years feeling guilty about my brother, thinking I'd failed him. But you gave me a second chance to keep my promise, to fight for someone. You healed me, Miho." They hugged, this woman and this child who'd found each other in the darkest moment and built something beautiful. Later that night, when the celebration was winding down and Miho was asleep upstairs, Kaya and Jaewon stood in the garden under the stars. "We did it," Kaya said. "We actually did it." "You did it," Jaewon corrected. "You fought when everyone else gave up. You believed when no one else did." "We did it together," Kaya insisted. "All three of us." Jaewon pulled her close. "I love you," he said. "I love how fierce you are. I love how you love my son. I love the family we've built." "Our son," Kaya corrected. "And I love you too. Both of you. Forever." They stood there in the garden of the home they'd built together, surrounded by the evidence of battles fought and won. Miho slept peacefully upstairs, his new heart beating strong and steady. The Park family had learned to accept, even embrace, the outsider who'd proven herself through sheer determination and love. It hadn't been easy. It had been war, sacrifice, fear, and hope all tangled together. But standing there under the soul stars, holding the man she loved, knowing their child was safe and healthy, Kaya understood something profound. Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into. Sometimes love requires fighting impossible battles. And sometimes when you're brave enough to stay when everyone else leaves, you get a second chance at everything. Miho had chosen her that day in the hospital, a dying boy making an impossible request. But in truth, they'd all chosen each other. Day by day, decision by decision, they'd chosen to be a family. And that choice had saved them all. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear about the power of chosen family and never giving up on the ones you love. Thank you for watching.